So we're discussion group 4.
I'm Adriana, and I'm A.
I'm Amy, and I'm answering question B's.
I'm Jessica, and I'll be doing C.
I'm Daisy, and I'll be doing D.
I'm Jessica, and I'll be doing E.
Okay, so we're gonna start talking about each of the children we got to read about. Okay, so my first child was Eugenia. I think that's how you pronounce her name. So she was born in California, but both her parents were undocumented. They both only spoke Spanish, but they kind of moved back from like California to Mexico based off the jobs they were having, and so she would jump from both countries. So growing up, she only really spoke Spanish, and now like she's going into schools, and because she only knows Spanish, she has a lot of ELL like helpers. So her first teacher saw her struggling and didn't know how to help because she had a lot of ELL students. But then she went on to a different school, and her teacher was very persistent on helping her and motivating her to keep that first Spanish space, because the stronger the first language is, she believed it'll be easier to learn a second language, which I also believe in. And so her parents Eugenia's parents had trouble understanding that, because they had an older son who struggled with that, with just learning Spanish and going to English, and now is dropped out of high school, and they don't want her to do that. So this teacher kind of talked to the parents and say no, this is very important, don't worry. And after that, and after the support of having that teacher, Eugenia became very successful in school. She was starting to learn English pretty well after she got that base of Spanish, and her parents realized that it's okay to speak Spanish at home and that she'll learn English the stronger her Spanish base is. So that's a little bit about Eugenia and her first.
A question that I thought of when I was reading her story was, do you guys think that the fact that her parents became citizens when Eugenia was so young would be helpful for her going on in school? Because I know a lot of English language learners whose parents are undocumented immigrants also have to worry about, am I going to come home and my parents are going to be taken away from me, and these types of things. Do you think the fact that her parents are being so supportive at home, she has very supportive teachers, she started at kindergarten?
Yes.
Mixed with the fact that her parents are now citizens, that she's kind of set up to better integrate into
I think
school
so.
system?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think also having that comfort that it's okay to speak your language and not be necessarily isolated or pointed at okay, maybe you are undocumented, to know yourself that you are a citizen and that you don't have that worry of being sent back to Mexico or something. It's definitely comforting for children growing up, and for their identities and for that first base language, and then moving on to English and stuff.
Yeah,
I know that's just my opinion. I don't know, what do you guys think?
So does that make her the August theory thing, where it was you can be, let me see where I put it, because I talked about it. You have the immigrant minorities, or you have the
the voluntary
involuntary minorities. Yeah. So would she be
I mean, they
considered an immigrant minority because she has support now?
I mean, they came over voluntary. It's not they kind of I don't know.
And she was born in the U.S.
Yeah, she was born in the U.S., but she
okay.
was just being transferred back and forth based off the job I think her parents had, because they were just struggling with their careers until they got a good job, and then they were able to become citizens with that hard work and the many years they worked.
So, I'm thinking, was she going back and forth due to a work visa?
Didn't say anything about visa. I can tell you that much. I don't.
I feel like once, yes, after your parents become citizens, you do feel a lot more comfort. Well, I wouldn't know, because before I was born, my dad became citizen, and he did come from Mexico. And till this day, my mom still isn't citizen, but she is a resident. And that still doesn't make me feel oh, she's still okay to be here. I still know anything can happen, because I know she's not a citizen. And it does, I feel affect children from at a young age, like you mentioned. But I feel that sort of fear is never gone, because you feel you're not from there or you're not from here.
So it's also an identity.
Yes. Like me, for example, I was born here, all my family's from Mexico, but I don't feel I'm from there or here. I just feel I'm just there. You know, I was grown up, doing this and that, speaking this language, speaking Spanish, but I've never felt like comfortable.
Mhm.
So I
You're,
kind
a
of
mix
like,
between the two identities
yeah,
almost.
and I kind of feel like I can relate to her.
Yeah, going off of that, my father isn't a born American citizen, but my mom is German, and she just became a citizen when I was in I want to say third or fourth grade. So I know what you mean when it's like that. I'm not from here nor there, though I've never felt like I was from Germany. I've always felt like an American citizen. I totally know what you're talking about because there was a time in third grade before she became a citizen where they threatened to send her back to Germany because her visa was up or a green card or something like that. So it's that feeling of when I come home, is my mom still going to be there sort of thing. I don't think it's easier when you have a parent that was stationed and born in America and is an American citizen, so you always know that one of your parents are going to be with you. So I feel like that definitely contributes to your own security within making a community and being a part of the school and all of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, and then just going to this being something that we're learning in class, wanting to be educators. For me, this is all of these students, it's a super important perspective to actually be aware of because my parents are, one was born in Iowa, the other was born in Oregon. They're U.S. citizens. That's nothing. I've never had a worry like that. I've never had a language barrier. And so becoming aware of these things is it's a super important base. Because did you say that her first teacher was just baffled? And
because she had a lot of ELL learners.
So me personally, I think I'm still going to have that sense of what do I do to help these children? But this is giving us such an important insight into the struggles that students face that I have never had to face.
Mm-hmm.
And it's super important to learn about these, and I've never been aware of it, and it kind of is upsetting that there are educators out there who still aren't completely aware of it.
Yeah. Or not least, sometimes I feel like you can become so overwhelmed with your thoughts that you don't actually look for other resources or some things to help you and your children, improve, which I think is something that's really being aware of you struggling in something and then getting the help that you need versus just ignoring it, which is something we as students and people and just in life in general, I feel like we need to know. But as teachers, when you're trying to educate someone else, you need to not only think for yourself and how you feel, but how they feel.
I know underneath your post about your kids, Moni and Osman, they're both immigrant students from different countries, refugees. Is what I'm looking for. And you asked the question, how are we not doing anything, or are we not doing to help them succeed if there are so many English non-English speaking students coming into the U.S. And my response to that was, I don't believe it's that we're not doing anything. I just think that we're not doing enough because there are so many English language learning students in the country, like you talked about, and there are going to be a lot of them in our classrooms. And I feel as though a lot of teachers are if they're an English language learner coming from a Spanish-speaking country, I got this, because that's in our minds when we think of English language learners before we came into this program. I'm assuming a lot of us thought Spanish-speaking as the first native language, or at least that's what I always assumed. But then when you see different demographics, sometimes Vietnamese-speaking students will be your highest immigrant population, or Romanian or something like that. So I feel as though our teachers aren't prepared and they're not immersed in enough cultures to be able to fully reach all of our students that we need to teach. So we just need to be aware of the fact that we're always going to have to be continuously learning how to accommodate our students. One year it might be Spanish speaking students might be the majority of the students we're trying to help, and then the next year might be a language and a culture completely different. I feel our curriculum and the way we teach and the way we interact with our kids has to always be changing.
Definitely reminds me of sorry, go ahead. Okay, an experience I had when I was at Coretta Elementary School. My second grade teacher I was working with, she every morning they had a morning greeting, and not just doing the languages of the students that are in that class that are a minority, but they had literally Arabic, they had Russian, they had Ukrainian, they had Spanish, they had Aloha, Hawaiian, which is
Yeah,
It is? Okay.
It is. Yeah.
Wasn't sure. Like all these languages from around the world, and like every week she would add another one. So kids would get to decide like which language they wanted to say hello in. So I think that was very cool and like very inclusive for to represent like all the students because it was a very diverse classroom.
Is it still recording?
2014. Yeah, it should still be recording.
Well,
Sorry,
I was thinking about like I did this little project in like 5th grade, I think, and you had to pick like some like leader from like another country and do like a profile on them, and I chose somebody from Hawaii actually. It was like a queen from Hawaii a long time ago, and I had to like write about all these different things, and because of that, I learned a lot of like some of the language and the names and stuff because it was interesting. Because I had to use like titles.
What grade was this again?
Like 5th grade. So actually, it helped me like learn more about like Hawaiian culture, which I thought was cool.
I also think that yes, they need to implement more of training to the teachers for multicultural students. But I also think that we need more teachers of color in that field.
Yeah, because I don't remember what reading it was, but it's like most teachers are white middle class females.
Yep.
I wonder why that
I think
is,
that was the
actually.
Ogbu reading.
Yeah. Well, part of it is that it's a historical thing. Women were secretaries and teachers,
That's a good point.
and then it's just, that's kind of the stereotype, I guess. But
I feel like for other cultures too, like there's lots of stereotypes for each culture and the jobs like that their parents
yeah,
are supposed to give them. Like I'm dating an Indian guy and his sister had like certain options of what her parents wanted her to like, study or to major in. And like when I told my family like I'm Lebanese, like and that's not normal for Lebanese people to like want to be teachers. Like that's not something the parents would like necessarily support. Like all my aunts were like, oh, like go be a pharmacist, go be, an engineer or something else. So I think it's interesting how I wonder why when it comes for people of color, maybe like there are the stereotypes for different jobs that go with that culture.
Like a stereotype for my culture would be women don't work. The guys just work. The guys provide the money. The women just stay at home, cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids if they have to. And nowadays, like the ladies are going to universities in Mexico. And like
you're
me,
here.
Yeah.
I am first in my family to go to university, and it's a lot different. Like my aunts are like, "You go to university?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, like 2017."
Yeah.
But they're just in that mindset that they just stayed. Like a lot of my aunts in Mexico don't work; their husbands are the ones supporting them.
The breadwinner mindset. That didn't leave the United States until like the 50s when women started to be secretaries, and even then, you're a secretary. I know mine worked at the switchboard.
My mom's still a secretary.
There's a TV show or a Netflix show about that.
Yes.
I don't remember.
I don't know what it's called.
called.
We're off track.
Yeah.
I know we got pretty.
So yours.
Oh, my students. So I had a student in the case studies, named Salvador, who was a Latino student who came from Mexico. His mom had a high school degree from Mexico, and his father frequently left, and it was suspected that he was abusive towards Salvador when he was home. So he was in 3rd grade after being in a bilingual schooling, like English, Spanish, at the same time. Kindergarten and 1st grade, and then his kindergarten and 1st grade teachers didn't think it was working out for him, so they thought it might be better to stick him into an all English 2nd grade class because he wasn't confident in speaking Spanish or writing Spanish or any of those things, but he was also not receptive to like speaking or writing English as well, so they thought maybe like one language only would be easier. He was switched back into a bilingual 3rd grade, and then he had a teacher, Anne I believe was her name, who found out, was trying to start building confidence within Salvador, not necessarily pertaining to his reading and writing, but just within himself, because that's where a lot of your learning comes from, is being confident in yourself and being I can do this and I can learn this new topic and stuff like that. At the end of the year, him and his mom, like the teacher and his mom, decided that he wasn't ready to move on to 4th grade. He repeated 3rd grade with a teacher named Francisco, who was another Latino teacher, and that positive role model in Salvador's life that was also of the same culture that he was really helped him in terms of his advancing his academic achievements. And at the end of the year, he moved on to 4th grade, and then 2 years later, Francisco went back to check up on him to see how he was still doing, and he was still making progress. Though things will always still be hard for Salvador because he has a lot of these factors against him, parents that are in and out of his life and stuff like that. He was making progress to get to where all of his peers were getting, and I think that's really important. The idea of him learning better with having a teacher that was a positive male role model because he can identify within another Latino male, and I think that's something that some of our English language learning students will be without, because like you said, a lot of the teachers are white women. What are the little the minority students can't look to Amy, no offense Amy, and be like, I see myself in Amy, because that's just not true. And and I just think that's something that we have to be mindful to counteract, is the fact that we need to make sure that though they can't necessarily see themselves in us, that we make them know that they're welcomed in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you, my question is how are we teaching right now? How are teachers dealing with different languages in their class? Because that's a barrier. How do you even teach children if they're not understanding you? Do they have separate classes?
I believe so. It used to be ESL, English second language.
Right now, my little brother and my nephew go to the same school, Centennial Elementary in Mount Vernon.
Mhm.
And my little brother says that there's a girl that just came from Mexico, and during the day, in the middle for 2 hours, they take her away from the classroom, and they take her to a classroom for ELL students.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that it was a Latino doing those classes.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure what exactly they teach them there, and then they take them back to classroom.
Mm-hmm.
I also have experience when I was the same school, Cordata, but there was a lot of ELL learners in that classroom. There was 3 people who their first language was Punjabi, and then Spanish, and then Ukrainian, I think. And so throughout the day, they'd get pulled out into their certain classes where they'd get extra attention or the extra help they need to improve their the skill, their writing skills or their reading skills.
But my question is, how do you help them? Even if you bring them all in a classroom, how do you communicate with
Because they
them?
all speak different languages.
Yeah.
Well, then, even on top of that, that's, I understand that currently is the best solution that people are finding, to take them out and to find a way to give them extra help, but that's so isolating. That was happening when I was in elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 20 years old. This is a decade, and you knew the kids who got pulled out of the classroom, and it's just they're leaving to go do their special work, and it's students who English isn't their first language already have that sense of isolation because they don't speak the dominant language, and then on top of that, you pull them out of their classroom environment, which just limits their time with the community that they're in.
But then they miss what the teacher was going over.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I don't know if this is completely true, but it's also something that happened at the school.
Mhm.
They would all all the students would get pulled out into different groups, technically by their levels of English or their levels of reading. But I noticed that one time because my little buddy was someone whose first language was Punjabi, so I'd follow her sometimes, and she went to an area where they worked more on her English and the reading levels to make her more confident, to get her more motivated. Because in the classroom, when she was surrounded by her peers, she was very shy and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But when she was in a smaller group, she would be more social and stuff. So I'm not sure if this is what they do exactly for each situation, but I think they because I know at one point the room would be empty. They would all go to their different reading groups. But I noticed that the students who had English is not their first language, they would go to a different area, or not to a different area, but to their reading group, which is really the help they need for their English.
So do they have to have helpers that know a lot of different languages?
I don't know. That's a part.
I feel as though they're trained in learning how to. I feel as though they're trained in
Communicate.
teaching how to teach,
Teaching
like learn
English.
new languages and stuff
Just
like
like
that.
what we're
Like the linguistics class we're in, like learning how to teach to children how to dissect words and to like say them and work on their speech, their pronunciation, and their understanding.
Yeah.
Because if you understand why words are the way they are, then the meanings and the pronunciations start to follow suit.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I entered kindergarten, all I spoke was Spanish, and there was a lady assigned with me like at all times, and she was white, and whenever she would teach me stuff, she'd be like book, and then she'd be like book, and then she would know a couple Spanish words, and she'd be like libro, and I'd be like okay, libro's book, and then I caught on like on English really fast.
Mm-hmm.
I like the lady.
Good. Fond memories.
Did your parents still teach you Spanish at home? Or did
Yeah.
you know it really well?
I knew it very well because back then my mom didn't work, so I was just with her all the time. So when I entered kinder, like I knew no English.
Yeah.
Like all I knew was my name. That was it.
Yeah.
And I didn't even go to preschool because my mom was there. So I was always with her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I hear that it's easier. I read this. I'm not sure where any of you remember. Then that'd be great. That students that are strong in their native language too, also like can pick up a language better.
Well, that's what my reading was saying. Like, that's what, for Eugenia, that's what her second teacher was saying. Like, the stronger your first language is, the easier it is to pick up the
Yeah.
other one.
That's what our reading was saying. too,
Yeah.
I think.
I knew one of the other student I had. His name was, I'm assuming, Tao. He was born in a refugee camp in Thailand, and then he moved to California, where he lived with his dad and his two older brothers, while his mom and his sister were separated in a city like hours away from him. And his dad couldn't speak English, and he couldn't read English, and he wasn't really literate like in his native language as well. And Tao was in 7th grade, and he lived in a rough area where there was like gang activity as well. So by the end of by his 8th grade, like he had gotten wrapped up in gang activity, and I wonder if things would have been different for him had his father been able to also like help him speak English at home, or at least like help better relate to him in their native language. Then maybe things would have been a little, if he could have been more active in his like schooling career. I know he wanted to mention that he didn't want Tao to end up the same way his brother did, because his brother got like wrapped up in gang activity and eventually like dropped out of school. And for 8th grade, Tao got sent to one of those like continuation alternative schools, which another one of my questions is, do you think that like we should be placing kids into these like alternative continuation schools if we already know that they're at a disadvantage for being ELL students?
I mean, my school district is in the middle of like a very white suburb, so we didn't have, like, but one of our alternative schools was called SAS, I think is what it's called, and it was like Secondary Academy of Success, and that's where SAS, you know, but like
If you're
that's where
sassy, you're going
that's where
sassy.
kids who just like didn't feel like they had a place or got into trouble got sent, and I knew some people who like chose to go there, so it's a little bit different because they weren't placed there, but like they would then like post on Facebook or something and be like, I'm so happy I have teachers who get it. They get that I'm not meant for the intensity of Inglemoor High School, which is a very IB bound, AP bound school. And they had teachers that understood it, and they were getting extra help for subjects that they weren't finding assistance for. So I think some of them are helpful, but again, my experience, I wasn't at that school. All of the people that I talked to weren't ELL students. They weren't related into gang problems, but I knew some of them had gone down narcotic paths and got off of it because they have assistance at these schools.
I guess the support system must be better there because there's smaller class sizes, because not everybody's going to the alternative school. I guess I was thinking more on the terms of like the stigma of already having a stigma of being an English language learner, as well as the stigma of going to a school. But I feel as though in the case that you're bringing up, even though I know it's not the same, but like having that support and having those, you have to be a very empathetic teacher to work in situations like that, to understand each of the struggles that your students are going through. So maybe it would be better to have schools that are better for English language
Like
learners
have
specifically.
specialized schools.
But then would they get into the thing of like, oh, you go to the special school, like sort of thing? There's always going to be that stigma.
When would you even like place them? Like, because you can't like, you know how you were saying, like if you already know like someone's gonna have all these things going against them, to maybe just place them in that school for them to maybe be more successful. But like, who are, I don't know, I don't say this, but like, who are we, or who is to decide whether they're gonna go down those, like, you know, there's obviously people who like break all the stereotypes for their family, for the culture, for the stereotype that they are placed in.
Yeah.
So
And like Daisy said, she got
yeah,
English really quickly in kindergarten. And what were you saying, Jessica? You were saying?
Oh, I can talk. I was thinking about what we were reading, like, because it's talking about like support, like the kids with more support did better in learning. So like maybe sometimes if it happens that they're sent to that school, maybe they're getting more special attention from the teacher because they're smaller classes. Maybe it'll help them.
Well, and then like the people, the students around them have a higher understanding of what they're going through too, because like
more like community.
yeah, well, because like branching back to like some of our questions, it was the like I think the second question for me, it was about like short-term students. What was it? Your newly arrived students with adequate schooling, and the examples that they gave in the book. I think you did one of them. It was the three siblings, and then what was the other one's name? Farah. Did you have her?
yeah.
So I read about them in aspect to this question, and the three siblings had a really big support system. Like they had family helping with their living situation, pushing them to be in school. But then your student, I didn't get that sense. Like her parents were struggling just as much as her, and she just felt isolated. So having a cheerleader can make or break. And I think as an educator, that falls on us sometimes to be like, it's okay to not know it.
Yeah.
You know this, you don't know this, but you know don't know this. So let's build. Let's work on it.
There was something in the Ogbu article called the context interaction model, and that was at like the national level, all of these stigmas about like in mass media about like immigrants and stuff like that. And then on a smaller scale, there's like neighborhoods and your family and like that sort of outside of school support system. And then within there's like the school, whether there's like adequate staffing at the school, if there's after school care and like ways for you to get the help that you need. And I think that goes along with like the teachers being like, I want to work with you on the things that you don't know. If they don't have that and they don't have the support like within their families as well, and then they have all of the pressure from mass media and all of those things saying that like they're not going to make it, and seeing in movies that they're characterized as like stupid or like that they can't do it, and they're like and that they're like doomed to fail. If they don't have those things within the family and the schooling, then what are we supposed to do? You know, like what are they supposed to do? How are they supposed to know that they matter and that they're going to, how are they going to have the motivation to learn?
Yeah. I don't know if this is like new or not. So I went to private school for like my whole elementary, so I didn't get to see anything in public schools much. But like, so I don't know if this existed when I was in elementary school, but like I did Compass Campus. I know that you guys are doing it, which I think is a cool program because I worked at Alderwood Elementary School for that time, which I think was my freshman year, and I worked in an after-school program for students who I think their parents maybe the English was not their first language, so they are able to help their children as much with the school, like with what they're learning. So I got to go in there and like I got to help them with their homework that maybe they're not going to be able to do at home because they don't have the help that they need. So having that support and having those resources, and, like each teacher basically telling their parents and like telling their children like, yeah, I think you should really go into this program. I think this would be really beneficial. It's like a very positive step forward for like offering like those steps and those resources so children can break those stereotypes, so those children don't like think they only have one like road, that they can make that road for them to go up.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. And again, I don't know if if it's a new thing or if they had that when I was in elementary school. That's very new to me.
When I was in elementary, I would stay for an after-school program. I could not remember the name of it, but I just remember it was a lot of ELL students, and they would just teach us how to write, how to pronounce words, what word goes with like the image and stuff. And I think that was very helpful too, and they would even help us with our homework. I just can't remember the name of it.
Yeah.
Actually,
And they put a lady that was very patient with us.
Yeah.
And that's what we need, because I feel like there's some instructors that are not patient with students.
so
I have stories about that.
And you can tell when someone wants to help you and when they don't want to help you.
you
Yeah.
can feel it.
When they act as though you're a burden on them and they're doing you a favor by like trying to help
Yeah.
you out. Share a
So
story.
my sister had this teacher, I'm not kidding, in 4th, 3rd grade or something, and she used to yell at her students, like yell at them, and they would like cry. And they would ask to go to the bathroom, and she would yell at them and say no, and tell them they couldn't go to the bathroom, and the kids would like pee their pants in the class.
Oh my God. That's just a big
She-
mess.
Like, and this has been going on for years in this town. It was like my hometown in California. And she finally got fired like a couple years ago. And we're like, yeah.
That happened to me
Should ask
too in
the question.
elementary. They didn't let me go, and I accidentally peed myself. And
I don't know why
like my
teachers
parents
do
were
that.
very mad
This
at the teacher, not at me.
is like
Well, yeah. How dare you pee your pants?
And then my dad was like, "Well, next time you gotta pee, just walk out." I'm like, "Well, we don't want to cause problems, but."
Yeah.
We also
Yeah.
don't
Peeing
want to
your
cause
pants is a
different
problem.
problems.
this is kind of like the flip side to English language learning. I moved to a different city in the middle of 6th grade, and when I got there, I was like placed into a Spanish class, which I don't know why they would place you in like learning how to speak Spanish in the middle of the year. Why they would place a 6th grader into a Spanish class, but whatever. And the teacher's name was like Senora Sila or something like that. She was like a old woman. Regardless, anyway, I remember the first day I needed to go drink like water, and she was like, "You have to ask me in Spanish," and I was like, "This is my first day. I know like agua is like how you say water in Spanish, but I don't know how to ask you to go get it." And that was like my only experience that I've ever had that somebody didn't know how to speak my language, and I was like, "Whoa!" Like she's not. I know she knows that I want to go like get some water, but I didn't know how to convey it the way she wanted to, and now that kind of like makes me think how hard it must be for English language learners to have their whole day be like, I need to go to the bathroom, but I don't know how the hell to say it. I don't know. And then, so they, they end up peeing themselves or something like that, or how to, like, convey their own ideas, so they just decide, I'm just going to sit back and not say anything, because I just don't know how.
That's interesting. My sister's high school like Spanish class, he would speak Spanish the day they came in, and he would speak English the whole quarter.
What level?
It was
High school.
1st and 2nd level Spanish.
So like 100, 200?
Mm-hmm.
What?
So, yeah, they didn't get any English from him at all
That's
in the
Our
entire
French
class.
teacher in my high school was like that too.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they would tell me.
I'm sitting here so shocked, but like
But,
kids
like,
go through that.
Yeah, but isn't that weird though? That like, I don't know, why would they do that if like, obviously
Like
it
when
seems
I
like
was in
we're
300, 400 in German, like we were only allowed to speak in German unless there was something that we were like absolutely did not know the word. Sometimes she'd be like, look it up.
So is that a type of forcing teaching?
It's
don't
more
know.
like
I think it's like they're trying to like.
I think that there's good intentions with it. It's just very
I think they're trying
hard
to
to
like,
expect.
envelop you.
Yeah.
like 100, 200 level.
You can't
Like,
just.
You don't have any structure.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know how to count in German, so we learned the numbers, comparing them to English numbers.
Well, I think they're trying to like mimic like if you go to a country and you don't know the language at all.
Like every
And-
ELL student.
Yeah,
ever.
like
Yeah.
exactly. So that's why I'm
Yeah.
thinking about that. But
It is
maybe it helps them like
It is.
feel a little bit.
I don't know. It is weird because I'm sitting here just appalled at that, but like
People
that
live
is
in
that
all
is
the
something
time.
that yeah.
Those are like people's norms. Like so
Yeah.
I
Well,
like
no,
how
maybe
I
it is
have been
a
learning
good
about
thing.
this, and I'm still like the audacity,
Yeah.
which I guess is a good mindset to have because you have to find ways to work with students, even if it is just like learning. Like you have a student in your class whose first language is Russian, maybe you take the initiative as a teacher and learn things like bathroom in Russian and water in Russian, or like so they have some way to be like, don't speak Russian, So
Weren't you saying that in elementary school there was a Spanish speaking student in your class that like got to actually teach some phrases to like remember?
yeah. His
I
name
think
was
that's important.
his name was Jesus, and I can't remember if it was every day or like once a week. My teacher would like she even like found a little like disc game thing for computers because I remember what those are called, and like she'd pull like our little popsicle sticks out of the little cup, and you went up and you were like you clicked the color, and it would be like. Thank you. I took German. I don't remember any Spanish. And then, like, if we had a hard time pronouncing it, Jesus would be like, "Oh, you roll your R," and then I'm over here without that phoneme, and I'm like, "I can't." But like, it made him involved.
Yeah.
And like because he was semi-fluent in English, so like, it was just a way to make everybody else understand. Like, he doesn't sometimes understand our words. He's helping you with Spanish, you can help him with English.
Yeah.
Because I think we're sitting here talking about how teachers need to be more aware, students need to be more aware, and not, like, ostracize other kids. Is that the right word?
I think a big question is like, how do we do that?
You don't
That
want to
comes
like
from home,
single.
don't
Yeah.
you think?
Agreed.
Yeah.
True.
A lot.
We don't want to what?
Well, you don't want to like. Also, I feel like it would single them out. Like you don't want to make them feel like.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you need everybody to like be available to help.
I guess, like, one way was the hello thing. You just start there. Just like, does anybody
I
have
like that.
Does
Yeah.
anybody know a different way to say hello? And
Another
then-
cool thing is like because some of those students like the kids who spoke Punjabi, like they were able to like say other things and try teaching like Spanish kids would say like almost that's with the hello because they know that, and then other kids would pick up on that, and then the other kids who decided to say hello in Spanish that they would also then ask like how are you guys. And I thought that was cool that like every time we saw something you'd see the students become more comfortable in that language, but also learn like a new phrase or a new saying from that student who is like, you know, bilingual or like, you know, that is their first language.
Mhm.
So it's it's cool. It's diverse and I love that.
Yeah. We live
That
in a
would be
very
cool.
diverse country.
Yeah.
We don't act like it.
Yep.
What do they call it? Like the
The melting pot, but nobody turned on the heat. Just a bunch of different cheeses hanging
Cold
out.
cheese.
Cold cheese. This got weird.
Who's is it D or is it C?
We're almost out of time.
Oh, are we?
Already?
Yeah, it's
Haven't gotten to B or
it's
C.
37 minutes.
I went. It's
Yeah.
With me? I didn't even touch on my own kids. I talked about other people's kids. So I had one girl, I think her name's pronounced Moni, and she started schooling here. Like, she started in kindergarten, but she was originally from, where did it say? I can't remember, but she was a refugee in Thailand for a while, and like at home they didn't really speak English all that much, and like in her first classroom she was just very quiet. Cambodia, thank you. That's what I thought, but I don't have it. Oh, I do. Just kidding. I'm just really good at remembering things, but like she was really quiet, and her teacher was just kind of like nervous about it, just like she's not getting it, like she's not talking, but like she would go out of the way to be like, oh, you're a really good artist, like I like your artwork, and like made her feel special and stuff like that. And then the student moved to different school, and her teacher like wanted to keep tabs on her and like went to visit her at her new school, and like first and foremost smaller classroom sizes, and this little girl was just speaking English, chit-chatting with her friends, just getting along all swell and stuff, and her teacher was shocked because she thought she was like illiterate and would never get it, but it's out called a silent period, so that it's that time where you just take to observe and listen.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that can be mistaken for not getting it, being stuck, and for small kids it's easier to get over that, because was it in this class we were talking about like 4-year-old English is way different than 17-year-old English, so you can pick up the 5-year-old kindergarten speak way faster, unlike my other kid that I read about, Osmond. So he was born in Yeah, and then okay, apparently you read my kids too.
I have yours open.
Oh. He was born in Somalia, was only there until like age 6, and then they were refugees in Kenya until he was 12 when they moved here, and during that whole time there was never education. He didn't get any foundation, so he showed up here, age 12, was put into a junior high classroom, and then just, there wasn't that extra step to help him fit in. His parents didn't know English, and it is that 12-year-old English, 5-year-old English, and it just never really got there.
And I feel like that's when age you're more like self-aware and what's the word?
Self-conscious.
Self-conscious. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I studied abroad in Spain, and I'm very self-conscious about my Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
And like my dad always will try putting me on like the spot to speak it in front of his Spanish friends or whatever. But like after I'm a couple shots in, I've been told like my Spanish is like beautiful because like I'm not worried.
You're not nervous.
Of how I
Especially,
sound.
yeah, or like I know like I don't know, it just comes to me easier for some reason. But like when I'm sober and I think about it too much, and then the Spanish level that is like usually up here, it goes down to here because I think too much. I think that's a lot when it comes to like children in that age. So like
And
his
they
name's
can't get
Osman.
smashed in class.
Exactly. Like he's trying to he just moves to a new country.
Yeah.
He's already like isolated as being a different person. Then he doesn't know the language, and like his English is supposed to be the same compared to like a 5-year-old who moves to the U.S. and like they use the same vocabulary words for like ever before like improving.
Yeah,
So
and
it's
he
very
hasn't
intimidating.
had
Education,
He,
yeah.
he can't do algebra.
Yeah.
That's introduced in junior high. Like, that's higher level math. You're writing papers. You're reading. What did I read in junior high? Like that. Romeo and Juliet. Like.
Oh, in high school.
Oh, I read it in 9th grade, but my 9th grade was in
yeah.
junior high.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like How to Kill a Mockingbird and
I didn't read that. In
How
school.
to Kill a Mockingbird.
To Kill a
Yeah.
Mockingbird.
How to Kill a
Tis the
Mockingbird.
greatest sin.
A guidebook on how to kill your local birds.
Get out. Okay. So those were my kids, and I thought that it was an interesting thing. Just the connection that I made between the two was age. Age could make or break.
You know the first person you mentioned, how she was like a totally different person.
Yeah.
Yeah, that reminded me of do you know like Sofia
Vergara.
Vergara? Yeah. She like said one time like you should hear how smart I am in my home language or something.
Yeah.
That really stuck with me. I was like, wow.
That.
Because I feel like there's like, you know, if you hear somebody like struggling with English, you're like, oh wow, they must not, know it very well or something. But like, she's actually like, I don't know.
It's
Actually,
just
No, it totally makes
It's kind of
sense.
like
Yeah.
it's like a stereotype.
Sometimes you
know?
can't get the word that.
That's like my aunt now that I think
Yeah.
about it. Like my mom and all her siblings, they're all languages. English. Arabic, then French, then English. I can't even speak English, and that's my first language. No, but like she tends to be the one like her Arabic stuck more, like her accent and everything. And sometimes we think like because she's not the best driver in the family, because of certain things, like we don't think she's very smart. But I guess she was the smartest, like back in Lebanon. Like she was one that everyone would go to for help. Like she is very intelligent, but I wouldn't think about that because of the way she speaks.
Mm-hmm.
Like the other day she posted about like a cooking class, and instead of saying like come meet us there with 2 E's, she spelled it like meat, like the food meat. And I told her daughter to go correct it because I wasn't going to. But it's just like crazy to think about like what you just said, Jessica, about you should know how smart I am in my own language. Like
Without this language barrier.
that's gonna stick to
Are
stick with me now.
Are we under are we saying that our children or like our students are at a lower level than underachieving is the word I'm looking for? Are we placing them in categories as like underachieving just because of this language barrier? Like, are we being too hard on them? Like, I feel like we shouldn't be holding them to the same like standardized tests, for example. We shouldn't be having our English language learners take their like EOGs is what we call them in North Carolina. Like at the end of the year, they're not going to pass an English EOG on their first year of being in this new country. But that doesn't mean they're stupid. It should be, look how far they've come. Not like, oh wow, they're only at this. Yeah, because these kids some kids that are English language learners, like not English language learners, get crappy tests. Maybe we should be looking at those kids, not the ones who came in and are getting similar test results.
But that's because like I feel like our whole schooling like in the U.S. is all based off of tests.
Yep.
You
Which
just gotta
is-
teach a material.
It's stupid.
Yeah.
For-
It is.
it-
Not personalized
I
at
have
all.
Well,
testing
'cause, like-
anxiety. And
Yeah, and then schools and teachers get judged based on that, and like
Teachers
my-
are like robots. They just tell them, you gotta teach this.
yeah,
and
that
the
and
amount of
that's-
resources a school gets depends on the test scores that
Yes,
their
I-
schools get.
I got an
Public
interview.
school for you.
My
Mhm.
former elementary school teacher and we were talking about standardized tests, and she's like, I hate them with a passion because I'm given an outline of how I'm supposed to teach and what I'm supposed to teach, and I don't get any liberties in it. And
It's the Common Core.
it, yeah, and it takes out her words, not mine. It takes out the fun. And she teaches elementary school, and yes, you have to teach and you have to give all of these foundations for the rest of schooling, but they're 7. Like, you have to be able to have fun with them, and all
Yep.
of these standardized tests, teachers don't think they can have fun with them anymore. That sounds
I
wrong.
feel like all of the resources too that will allow you to teach what they want and let them have fun costs money, and teachers aren't provided, enough stuff. Like the teacher I worked with, she said that like the amount of money, I don't remember the exact amount, but like she spends a good chunk of the money that she's paid for yearly just on new supplies. Like
Yep,
all the books that
pencils,
on everything, like
erasers.
the books
But
that we were going
papers
through and I had to organize, she had bought, not the school, she had. And I thought that was insane because that was a very like white predominant
Yeah.
school too. It wasn't like a low income school district. It's just like that school was like there's no diversity in it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's crazy how like
And I was in like this teaching academy program my senior year, and we went to this place called Lakeshore Learning, which is a store where teachers buy all these like birthday calendars and these like cool like pencils and these like educational supplemental books and stuff like that. Those things are extremely expensive, like extremely expensive. So if they're already buying the ones that their like regular students can use, imagine how much more expensive the specialized ones are that could potentially help their kids that need more help. All of that stuff is out of pocket, and it's so expensive. You just can't afford it.
No. And then schools and teachers get punished for students not doing well when we don't have the ability to get the resources to help English language
Yeah.
learners or to help people who have other learning disabilities. And then it's one of those cases where you have so much material, so you take them out of their learning environment, you put them in a portable with the other kid. Like, obviously this wasn't English for me, but like I failed my first standardized test in math, and I had to get pulled out of the room to get special math help, and I went home and cried every day because it's isolating and embarrassing. And the United States of America as a whole has to be looking at this and how it affects kids, because that is what makes it hard.
That's what I wrote like in my entrance essay to this college. So I was thinking about like how everybody learns differently. Because I talk about this a lot in like with teachers in like my other college. Because like some people learn best like
there's a kinesthetic learning and
Yeah.
Visual, audio,
visual,
yeah.
socially, visually, audibly, like anyways. And like the standardized testing, I think it's only like it's kind of strict. It's like
If
like,
you see
oh,
things written out for
I
you,
don't know.
you're gonna get it. But if
Yeah.
like lecture type people that thrive in like
The audio.
yeah.
audio.
facts based
Yeah.
things, whereas some people need to like have it like
hands on.
they need
Yeah,
to practice a
some
million
kinesthetic.
times before they can do it.
And even then, like, just to get into woodring, like I had to take, because my SAT tests weren't high enough, which are tests that you need to take to get the West B. I had to take
Yeah.
the writing like 3 times just so I can get into it, because I'm not the best writer, and especially when I'm put on a timer and you're put in this room with this box, I get freaked out and my English goes to
With
shit.
60 questions and then.
Like
It's
reading.
all the grammar questions
Yeah, and they
too.
give you not enough. And they cost money. Like I literally have to pay $60 per test.
Yeah. How is someone whose parents don't even can't even write fluently in their own language going to know how to put a comma in the correct place in another language than the one that they were spoken at home?
And then it just blows into a whole other
And then-
conversation about language now.
and then
It's
they
changed
get
so
put
much.
into like the
Just
pull-out group.
exploded.
They get pulled into like a dumber, like a slower group because they missed a few questions on the writing and now suddenly they can't write.
Yeah,
when if they were writing in their native tongue, they could write a whole essay about grapefruit.
I
She's
failed
being
math
heated.
by like 4 points. Sorry, this was the 4th grade and I'm still so, I mean, I'm 20 years old and I'm still upset about it. Like, I failed by 4 points and then spent the rest of my school year the next year.
4 points.
It hurts me. And like, that's what it is for other students. I get it. Wow, that was a light bulb moment for me.
Yeah, why don't they let ESL students like write an essay in their
Native tongue.
Because sometimes they're not even fluent in that. Some
Maybe-
kids aren't fluent in either language.
Or they can
So-
speak it at home, but they can't write it.
And
Yeah.
that's when you need
yeah.
somebody to sit down with them and be like, because like I did observation in a classroom with my old teacher, and she had me working with the ELL kids, and like I would sit and they're taking a like government test, and I sat and read the test to them, and like then if they were like they didn't know a word, they'd be like, "Can you explain that word to me?" Obviously, if it was like something that like if it was like, "What does the word?" or like, "What is legislature?" like I couldn't explain that word to them and be like, "That's giving you the answer." But if they were confused on like something small and specific, I would explain that to them because I'm a native English speaker. I know that word. Like, that's a resource that we could be providing. Like, you don't give the kid the answer, but if they don't understand a word, have somebody there to be like, "Oh, okay, like, here's what this means." Like, give it to them in different context. Like I don't know, the word after or something.
I wonder with technology, like if we'll get better like teaching,
Well, because
like with like ESL students. Like
Well,
I
'cause
wonder if there'll be like
yeah.
translator programs
yeah,
where
like
it'll work
click
with
on a
any
word.
language. That way the
Kind of
teachers-
like Leaping Frog, where you
Yeah,
clicked
yeah.
on the word.
I saw this ad on Facebook. It was like this like translator, and the girl like spoke into it, and it doesn't need like internet or anything. She just spoke
Yeah.
into it, and then it translated automatically what
Whoa.
she was
An
saying
earpiece,
into the other
yeah.
language, and she was in Japan or something. And they
Yeah.
were like, "Whoa!"
I know a lot of those kids have those little like translator books, like those flip books. In the Bellevue School District, there are a lot of kids that come from like Asian countries and stuff like that. A lot of them from like Japan and things like that. And there's this little girl, Amy, that had one of those little things that was just constantly like keying what she wanted to say into them because she didn't know how to like.
All the AUAP students here. Do you guys know what AUAP
Yeah.
students are? They're the Japanese exchange
Okay.
program that comes here. So like they come in like 3 sections, but they all have those.
Mhm.
Like because they come here, some of them with like no English at all.
Yeah.
But they come here because they want to learn English.
And that's
they
like-
want to experience it. They have those in school.
Sometimes teachers use those as a crutch. They're like, oh, well, they have this thing that can magically teach them how to say these
Yeah,
words in English. I don't
dependency.
have to
Yeah.
tell them.
Yeah, that
But then
definitely.
some schools don't have them funds.
Mhm. And their parents can't supply them with one
Yeah.
to take to school.
Yeah,
But like our teacher things, you don't want them behind like a.
that's
Yeah.
what.
a
Yeah,
tablet the whole time.
dependency
Yeah.
of. Yeah.
Oh,
Also, because then they're not learning; they're just
Yeah.
reciting what they see on the screen.
Yeah, I think like when it comes to standardized testing, that might be something that those test makers ought to be looking into because like that is what holds people back sometimes. Is just they don't understand the damn question.
Yep.
Excuse me.
I remember being in high school and stuff, and they would have like if you couldn't, I think they had like separate testing if you couldn't like.
Oh,
read
I
very
don't
well.
know. But I know that like it's not. They were
If you need, like,
starting to
assistance.
do like my last year in high school. I didn't have to take it because I was a senior. Like they were starting this smarter balance test, and
Yep.
it's on the
I didn't
computer.
have to take it because I was a junior. You
Yeah,
can opt
so
out.
like that if it's on the computer, like you could have it available in different languages or an option to be like I'd prefer this so that it has like if you don't know what it's saying, you can click on it and be like, "Oh, that means later in or you know what I'm trying to say."
So, I was D and I got Sharma. Maybe you
Mhm.
looked over Sharma. So she was born in California, and her parents are from India, and she would come back and forth. So she's a Punjabi student, and she's a 5th grader, and some areas were very challenging for her, although she was very proficient in English.
Mhm.
And her parents were those type of supportive parents that they saw that she was struggling with something, they would be quick to react and go find the help that she needed. And although she was very like dedicated into school and like wanting to do better, like she would go out of her way. If she didn't understand something, she would get a book and try to translate it or just to fully understand it. And like the teacher was just wondering like if later on is that gonna affect her because people don't know her culture or her customs.
And I didn't say somewhere in your thing that like her parents were okay with her giving up some of her
Yeah.
like her own like native culture so she could acclimate better into like
Yeah, so they thought she would be able to succeed in the U.S. in her school if she gave up some of her Punjabi traditions. But still, on the weekends, she would still be very active with her religion, just so she wouldn't lose it. But they were okay with her losing, letting go of her traditions, just to succeed.
Which is just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
That you have to give up part of you to fit in.
with other people.
Yeah.
And I feel like at that stage, like the parents understand and it's heartbreaking for them, but sometimes they don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, okay, it's fine. You know, later on they'll realize it. Like, what did I do?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to think that's starting to change now. I don't know. I feel like identity has become like a huge new thing, like allowing people to like be who they are and being
Yeah.
okay with that when it comes to culture and religion and stuff.
Especially in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, like I worked
Not like that in North Carolina.
last fall. I worked in this thing where it was another like a low income school district, and there was a lot of ELL learners. But a lot of these students, their parents' first language was Spanish, but they didn't learn any. They learned English right away when they came to the U.S. or when they were born in the U.S. But now they're offering an after school program where they get to learn their like the language that their parents speak. So like I got to help in this Spanish program when you came in, you were only supposed to speak Spanish, and that was for like 5th graders, and I thought that was awesome. Like allowing them to go back and have the option to learn more about like their culture, about their language,
Yeah.
about their parents, like you know the language they speak. And I mean, that's definitely a new thing, I think, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like offering that, like the light's going off, but so I think like although like a lot of parents want to do that, they want to like give their kids the easier way out. So allowing them to adapt to the culture here more and like forgetting by your own identity just so they adapt better. I think it's definitely coming around where like it's okay to like be your own identity, but also like learn the things you need to do. I guess which is English to like kind of progress.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Who were your kids?
I had these 3 siblings: Jose, Luis, Guillermo, and Patricia. No offense. They grew up in El Salvador, in like a pretty wealthy family because their dad was a military official or something. And then so they went to like a bilingual private school and they were kind of taught English. But then when they were all teenagers, they watched their dad get like assassinated in front of them, and they had to flee the country. And so they went to their aunt in America, but like she was taking care of her husband, so she set them up in an apartment. So these 3 teenagers were like living on their own in an apartment, and they had to go to high school and finish high school and stuff. And they didn't. What was weird is that they like took English in their private school, but when they went to America, like they weren't able to communicate really. So they had to like learn English in high school, and then but they had like a support of like a lot of people in the community, and they joined like a church which really helped them. And then they had to go to like trial and have a judge declare that they could be in the U.S. for asylum
Yeah,
because
that's
they were fleeing.
rough.
Yeah. So, but the judge was kind of like, but because they had a lot of community support, he like granted it to them. So, yeah.
And did they all like go to college and
Yeah, they
are
all
like
Oh, that's
doctors?
yeah, they all got like a master's degree. Like they
Wow.
did really well
That's awesome.
because they were saying like that
Right.
because they grew up with like already like really well knowledgeable in their own culture and language, it
Yeah.
helped them a lot in high school. And they also like were really involved in high school in America, so
Mhm.
they like joined a lot of clubs and stuff, so that helped them.
What is our overall question?
I feel like there was a part where we had a question, but I would have to like rewind.
Yeah.
Watch it.
I think we can
Question.
post those. Like, we don't have to be like, these are our questions. We can
Yeah.
I
post
like
those.
the question a
later.
lot how teachers can apply like things for all of so everyone can feel
Yeah, how
Yeah.
do we?
not just the color
With
people, but,
multiple
like,
languages.
everyone.
Yeah, how
Yeah.
do we as educators accommodate everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it even possible?
Without making them stick out like sore thumbs.
And
Yes.
without having a million teachers in the classroom that are each individually like specialized in one particular language.
That's
Yeah.
my question, I think.
And then another thing, I think the one that you were talking about was we were talking about how does someone like communicate with someone else who has no English like background. Like if you don't speak their language, how are they supposed to teach them English when they don't have
Yeah, how do
like
you
a
even
common,
approach that,
common language together?
And should there be training for that, or just going based off of this, like articles and all that? Is that our training?
And how in
Yeah.
a profession that's so dominated by white women do we go past
That's like 10
that.
questions.
That's okay, we're allowed to have multiple and yeah, make sure every child is reflected in what we're teaching and what ideals we're, because that's what you do at school. You like represent your ideals and your values, even though you don't think you're doing that. That's what's happening when you're teaching kids. So you teach them to say please and
It's
thank
not that
you
it's
and this
wrong
and
to
that.
be
Yeah.
a white woman teaching. It's
Yeah.
just that like how
We just need to make sure that they
how
also
can you
feel
relate
involved.
to them, help them feel part of it.
All right, answer that. Okay, does someone want to stop it?
Okay.
We went.
Thank you.
Bye.